Leigh, hello.
Hello, how are we?
I'm well. Physically well.
The most important thing is I've got a lovely glass of Savvy Bee before me and a gorgeous episode of The West Wing to discuss.
I have an ice-cold glass of Hellas Lager. Gluten-free and vegan, so...
We love to see it.
Mm-hmm.
Drink safe, kids.
Drink safe, kids. I'm so tired that if we were in the Victorian era, I would be sent away.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would be being packed off for a season.
Yeah.
To, let's say, a country house or the coast.
Yeah.
I'm almost hysterical at this point. But apart from that, honestly, thriving.
And might I say, what a corker of an ep we have to discuss on the Queer Gals Watch the West Wing. I don't know why I put a "the" in front of our title just then.
I don't know. It makes us feel more formal, doesn't it? The Queer Gals. We are the Queer Gals. The Queer Gals Watch the West Wing. Welcome back to yet another gloriously deranged episode of this wonderful podcast hosted by Leigh and myself. We are here today delving into Season 2, Episode 13 of The West Wing.
Yeah.
Bartlet's third State of the Union.
Which very much feels like a working title. It kind of feels like this was the post-it note that was put up
100%.
on the whiteboard of like, we need to have an ep where this thing happens. But we've not got the usual kind of Latin flourish from Aaron Sorkin on this ep title.
I really would have thought he would have drawn something out of the episode to pull as the title. But as it is, it's very factual.
It's just very straight to the point, very Brechtian in that sense.
Yeah. In that case, maybe it is on brand for him. Maybe it's growth, Leigh. Maybe it's growth.
Who knows?
I'm excited to talk about this episode because I think it is a stunner.
I mean, the previously on alone, Ainsley, Joey and Abby, oh my.
We get every one of our good time gals in the previously on. I'm gonna roll straight into the episode recap, Leigh. I hope you're ready.
Let's do it.
So in our previously on, we get Ainsley, we get Joey, we get Abby, and an epic throwback to Abby's "Hello, pumpkin." "Hello, gumdrop."
Also, I'm absolutely thrilled and relieved that Joey is not in Mandyland, as we feared.
Yeah, I thought we'd lost her to Mandyland, honestly.
Yeah, because she's not been mentioned. We're over the halfway point for this series, and she had not yet been mentioned.
Yeah, it was touch and go there for a while, I feel. But I feel excited that she's there. Like, she wouldn't be coming back if there weren't forward momentum with her character.
She's only going to come back if she has something to do. I was like, is she going to be Bartlet's re-elect campaign manager? Because we know that she's done that role for California politicians. And maybe she's just the fresh voice that the Bartlet administration needs. And obviously, crucially, his re-election campaign manager can't be somebody from within the administration.
So that's the thing that I was like, oh, Leigh, I think you're onto something, because I was like, as far as I can remember, campaign staff can't be current staff, right?
Correct.
This episode opens in the West Wing at 8:45 p.m, Leigh. It's the eve of the third State of the Union. Sam and Toby are polishing the speech. And I don't know about you, but these feel like late changes.
These do feel like late changes. I think, obviously, that is not the place that you or I would like to be in kind of our equivalent dress rehearsal time. However, obviously, it's not unheard of, not to name any names, but obviously you've been involved in productions where script has still been being written at various points that were far too close to opening night.
I think that's why I find this quite triggering. But something that is coming from this polishing is that, like, Sam's like on the phone and then he's like, yeah, it's a go. It's a green light on the blue ribbon. And I was like, what the fuck is a blue ribbon? I feel like we find out later, but at the time I was deeply confused and also distracted by Bonnie.
Yeah. In a stunning burgundy suit. I really enjoy burgundy as a color on Bonnie. I think it really brings out lovely, like, a kind of auburn tones in her hair.
Yeah.
And I love to see it.
Yeah.
It is also lovely to see Toby and Sam kind of back on their flow with each other. They've clearly resolved any issues that were kind of lingering. There's no bitterness, I feel, lingering from the previous ep, which I'm thrilled to see.
They worked it out over that beer. I think Toby just knew that Sam needed to be upset for a while.
Yes.
Whereas Josh would be like, how do I fix this? How do I fix this? Like, tell me, like, what do I need to say to make it better? I feel like Toby's like, I think you just need to be mad at me for a while.
Yeah.
And in your own time, you'll be okay. But I'm not going to try and, like, I did what I did and I stand by it. So just have your emotional reaction.
And couldn't we all learn a lot from that approach to conflict resolution?
I think there are people in both of our lives who could take a lot from that kind of approach. But, you know, I just couldn't possibly go into it really. Meanwhile, at the National Strategies Group, Josh is loose in a room full of pollsters. And the man has no chill, Leigh.
Yes, and it would appear that since Mandy is in fact in Mandyland, Josh is now doing her job and running the poll.
Yeah, and like being so high maintenance. At one point, like one of the polling staff is like, oh, like such and such a thing, like it's over here. And he just turns and like looking daggers just goes, well, thank you, Mr. Helper. So Josh is very upset because someone's chewing gum. He then also is like, I don't know any of these people. They've all been hired by Joey Lucas. What if they have accents?
This was crazy. I was like, are we having like a xenophobic moment here? Are we having like a coastal elitism moment here?
Yeah.
I was unsure. It was unclear. I was stressed. Whatever it was, I didn't feel good about it.
No, a comment just in general that's not aged well. Shall we move on?
I will say though, however, Donna is in a lovely checkered trouser and deep purple roll neck.
It's a really fun outfit from her because it doesn't feel like very worky.
No, it's very like I'm working late because I'm an executive assistant.
I'm working late because I'm an executive assistant. Donna, we see you. We see you wearing a cute outfit around the boy you fancy. We see you. Oh, also more on that later because boy, oh boy, is this a complicated episode for Donna Moss.
Wow, there be tactics.
Truly, there are tactics at play here. Okay, we're still talking about the blue ribbon, but thank God, CJ once again coming in and just helping me out by explaining things that otherwise I wouldn't understand. She's in this press conference and she's saying a bipartisan blue ribbon commission to study the long-term future of entitlement programs is what's happened.
I love that you actually listened to what she was saying and made note of the content, whereas all I noted down was that she was in a gorgeous brown pinstripe collarless blazer.
I mean, she was.
Clearly took in none of the content whatsoever there.
So the Blue Ribbon Commission is like, we're thinking like a kind of like panel, research panel type government-funded commish, which is going to be doing a government-funded study. But it's bipartisan, so it's going to be, I'm assuming, like evenly weighted with Republican and Democratic viewpoints and support. I don't know what entitlement programs are.
So entitlement programs are like what in the UK we would refer to as like benefits.
Oh, cool. Okay.
But for particular groups. And obviously there needs to be legislation to allow that to happen.
All right. Okay. So that actually seems like quite a big get to add into the State of the Union.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, cool. In other fun news, Capitol Beat, if we remember, that was the late night news, like political news show that Sam Seaborn first went head to head with Ainsley in. They are broadcasting live from the West Wing all night. So,
which I thought was going to go a lot worse than it actually did.
Yeah, 100%. But also,
I foresaw catastrophe. I was incredibly stressed for the whole of this episode.
I was like, there will be hijinks for sure. And there are hijinks, but maybe not as negative as I thought they were going to be. I would just like to note that CJ uses the term that like, she's like, I'd like there to be no carousing. And I just don't think people are using the word carouse or carousing enough because that is a great word.
Yeah, I would like to add it to buxom from last step as our words that people simply do not use enough.
I would like to raise the point that like Sam Seaborn is so hot right now.
He's really found his look. He's found his haircut. He's like slightly more undone than in season 1.
Yeah. He's like a little bit more ruffled, which I'm enjoying. But I think more so, I find Sam hot when he's like doing last minute like edits two bits of script, but he's not being super weird and anal about it. He's kind of just like, he's like throwing things to Toby, and Toby's like, no, how about this? And then they're like scribbling, and then they're like, send it to the teleprompter. And both of them, like, it's sexy.
I think what we're landing on here is like the sexiest thing someone could possibly be as a queer gal, from a queer gal's perspective, is capable.
Oh, Leigh. Yeah, there it is.
As queer women, like the thing, regardless of gender, that we are always going to be attracted to the most
is capability.
Is someone being kind of a reliable, capable, smart person who's good at their job.
Yeah. And respectful with their coworkers.
A problem solver.
Yeah.
A creative thinker on their feet.
Yeah. You've absolutely nailed that, Leigh.
Thank you.
And that's the end of today's episode.
It's something that I've been thinking about for a long time.
Chapter 1 of the book. So, we are in the hallway of the Capitol building. Toby and Sam have sent the final edit of the speech to the teleprompter. And Jed is walking towards them. And then there's this really drawn out moment, which I found very stressful, which is that Jed then just like goes, like crouches down on one knee and just starts tying his shoelaces.
Now, to me, this spelled doom. This spelled doom. It felt like the moment in the film Wimbledon where Kirsten Dunst's tennis racket snaps.
Yeah.
Just before she goes out.
Yeah.
Onto the, what's it called? A pitch?
A court.
The court, thank you. I truly was like, this is when it's all going to go terribly, terribly wrong. He's like going to have some kind of disaster during this State of the Union.
Like, it was the fact that everyone else was stood like quite tall around him, and he was like knelt down, tying his shoelace. I was like, he's going to have a heart attack.
What stopped my heart was that our gorgeous friend Christian, who sends us spoiler-free trivia, said that that was improvised by Martin Sheen.
No wonder everyone looked so fucking baffled around him. That's such baller energy.
The confidence of like, I'm just going to stop this full take
to tie my shoelace. That's crazy.
I thought it would be kind of cool if like he just stopped to tie his shoelace, you know?
Yeah. So they approach the doorkeeper, which is a very fun piece of like traditional trivia. There's like a doorkeeper of the Capitol building. And the doorkeeper's like, oh, Mr. President, yes, I will. And the president's like, will you tell the speaker that I'm here? And then obviously really intensely, Jed just like says a prayer and crosses himself.
He just like pauses everyone and just has just a moment to invoke Jesus. To invite Jesus in to the State of the Union, if you will.
Never knowingly off-brand. What I did enjoy is once the doorkeeper heads off into the House chamber and the score's kicking in, Leigh, and like Jed's there with like the squad around him, and then you're watching, the camera's on Martin Sheen, and then you just hear the voice of the doorman like screaming, "Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States."
Which, all of that fanfare, it does kind of get you wet though, doesn't it? You know what I mean?
That's a crazy comment.
Maybe I'm just really hot for democracy.
Do you know what I mean? But like, democracy is fucking sexy as hell, right? And when you're like, yeah, the President of the United States, I frankly, like, I could have cried when he was like, the doorkeeper was just screaming the President of the United States and the camera was just holding on Jed. It was beautiful. And then smash into opening credits.
Yeah.
It was kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm hard for democracy.
Oh God, yes.
Should we go back to the polling center?
Please, yes.
So it's very cute. We're all watching, everyone at the polling center is like watching it on a TV. That's been like wheeled into the room, and we just like cut to like Josh and Donna like sat on these like on this little staircase at the polling center.
Now, do we think they need to be sat as close to each other as they are?
I don't think so. No, I think that's your boss, and so kind of weird for.
But I also felt the moment that Josh like leaned forward to hear the next thing that Jed was saying in the State of the Union.
Yeah.
And his arm then was suddenly like touching up against Donna's arm when he leaned forward.
Mm-hmm.
I felt that within me. You just know that the tingle is going all the way up her arm. It was a huge moment of like, you know how they say in like Jane Austen that it's like they don't have that much physical touch. So like when they do the dances, it's like, that's why it's so hot.
Yeah.
It felt like a kind of Elizabeth, Mr. Darcy dancing like, and it's electric when they touch, you know?
Which is amazing, but it means nothing if he isn't going to do anything about it. Do you know what I mean? That's what's so frustrating. He's like, I see this story and I just see him being fucking blind to the whole thing.
Now, he then says the most insane thing that Josh has said in the course of the show thus far.
It's my favorite quote from Joshua Lyman ever, because in a 2024 context, it's stunning. Which is, he goes, at the end of the speech, like everyone's clapping, and he just says to Donna, up there, that's where the president eats. That is his place of business. Yes, he did it well.
When did Josh Lyman become a drag queen? Like, what is going on?
He's like, Jed Bartlet fucking ate. I can't.
I did feel like we were being very overly confident before we had got a sense of how it had been received by everyday Americans. I fear that he has not done as well as Josh Lyman has jumped to believing he has done.
I mean, if we know one thing about Aaron Sorkin, you know, he's still in love with his ex-girlfriend. He loves Latin. And also he likes to foreshadow heavily.
He loves a little pullback and reveal, you know, he loves it.
And so I felt like us being like, wow, that's the speech of Jed Bartlet's political career was stressful.
Yes, agreed.
However, the arrival of Joey Lucas is iconic.
So iconic.
So like, she's not there for the speech. And like at the end of the speech, Josh is like, we need to open the polls. Where's Joey? Where's Joey? And Donna's like, oh, she had like travel problems with her plane. Mm-hmm. And as like Josh is flapping, you just hear Kenny shouting across the room, Is that Josh Lyman, the guy with the cutest little butt in politics? And I need everyone to know that, one, from Joey, that's an iconic opening line to the guy that you were flirting with. But to Kenny being like, signing at Joey, like, are you serious? You want me to shout that across the room? And her being like, oh yeah.
Kenny is the greatest ally to women that the world has ever known. The things that Kenny has shouted on Joey Lucas's behalf are an act of feminism.
I just think their chat is so insane. Like, their chat is so good. And he like lights up when he sees her. And
he does light up, and you can see little Donna's heart break into 1,000 pieces.
And I just feel like the way that he is around her and like the kind of like naughty, cheeky banter is giving, it's giving foreplay. It's giving, there's more of this. There's more of this and we can have no clothes on.
Yeah, it is outrageous. Like, someone please call HR immediately.
Honest to God, like, it's uncomfortable for everyone around them. Shall we to Capitol Beat?
Please, yes.
So we're back with the news anchor guy, like the host, who I don't know. There's something about him that gives me the ick, Leigh.
He has like an evil edge, for sure.
He seems like a lower back toucher, you know?
He has a misogynist vibe, for sure.
There's a Hoynes energy about him, you know?
He also introduces CJ as the very lovely CJ Cregg, which, like, a Victoria Sponge is lovely. CJ is a political operator. Lovely? Are you joking? It's an insult.
Are you fucking kidding me? She's one of the most powerful people in the Bartlet administration.
No.
Give me a fucking break, Mark.
I was deeply concerned that she was about to get a kind of Sam-style ass whooping. And I really don't know why. I'm just always so worried about CJ whenever she's not behind her podium.
Yeah, like when she's out in the wild, I'm like, what's going to happen? And she has quite a lot of like tragic lore of like falling into things, like people like having terrible boyfriends, like generally
falling from
kind
treadmills.
of like, yeah. So I think we're right to worry.
Yeah.
The thing that confused me is like the energy between her and Mark was like, are you flirting? Does he want her? Does she want him? Like, what's going on here?
I think the story here is that, like, unfortunately, no actor who was brought in to act in the West Wing was able to do anything other than play flirting. Because I think every guest actor that comes in to act with Allison Janney is like so besotted with her and taken with her that unfortunately it kind of comes across.
That's the only place you can go, really.
As though she has like a romantic backstory with every single male guest star.
I really love that for her. In my mind, CJ's like, I'm a woman in politics, so I'm going to get continually sexualized all the time by the men that I work with. So I'm always going to use it to my advantage and always make them think that I want them so I can get them to do things for me.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because she's a fucking class act. Now, what she has done is sat on a wet bench. So this is a kind of direct, like, honestly, an unhinged moment of story that weirdly comes back around again in this episode, which is that like they're doing this like little like bit on Capital Beat and then they go to commercial. And Mark, the host, is like, CJ Cregg isn't wearing any pants, anyone want to know? CJ's not wearing any pants. And I was like, this feels really uncomfortable. Cue Carol coming to the rescue with a bathrobe. And then Sam Seaborn's like, why don't you have any pants on? And CJ's like, oh, I went out to the like rose garden to get some air and I sat on a bench that had a wet paint sign on it. And I was like, okay, that's the CJ we know and love, the pratfalling CJ. Yeah. But also when I was like, why are you getting fresh hair, CJ? Were you going out for a cheeky cig?
Love that for her.
Little cigarette
love
in the rose garden.
Love that for her. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, big night.
I can see it
just
for
like,
sure.
You know, just passing Toby Ziegler in a hall and like smelling the cigarette on him and being like, Toby, can I just like bum a cigarette off of you?
Totally. Yeah, I see that.
You know, I'm not normally a smoker, but tonight I'm going to need.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you've nailed that. Yeah.
Yeah. Then there is an incredibly funny moment between Carol, CJ, and Sam Seaborn regarding the bathrobe that I think could be one of the most fantastic pieces of dialogue in this show today. Sam's like, where did you get the bathrobe from? And Carol's like, oh, from like the women's gym in the building. And he's like, we don't have them in the men's locker room. And they're like, well, we have them in the women's locker room. And he says, in the women's locker room, but not the men's? I mean, that's outrageous. 1,000 men work here and like 50 women.
Yeah, and it's the bathrobe that's outrageous.
Gorgeous.
Loved it. No notes.
Yeah, no notes.
Thank you, Aaron Sorkin. Thank you. We appreciate you, hun.
We appreciate you, and we really enjoy that. And I feel like that information probably came straight from the mouths of one of the consultants that they had on the show. I
did notice that Dee Dee Myers is one of the writers on this episode, and I was like, that feels like a little nugget. Yeah.
That's straight from Dee Dee, I think. Yeah. The final kind of nail in the coffin of this moment of CJ not wearing any pants is when she goes back to continue her like little moment. Mark, the host, is like, geez, if we took away the desk, I'd get 3 more share points.
I hate him. Lest we forget, he's of don't overreach fame to Ainsley. So he's vile.
This is true. Yeah, he's a vile man. But I think you described him as being really hot. Should we just go back to that?
And that's my toxic trait. And also why I no longer date men.
Oh, yeah. I mean, 100%.
Because for some reason, chauvinists are hot and that's unacceptable.
Problematic for you as a modern day feminist.
Yeah.
And maybe one to kind of delve into in therapy, you know?
To lesbianism, Fiona.
We get a tiny nugget of info in this scene, which is important because we will come back to it. So CJ says to Sam, oh, just so you know, Jack Sloan has a note on his record for excessive force 17 years ago. And Sam's like, oh, what? And then we kind of move on. But I'm just logging that for later.
Yeah.
Because we must away to Dolores Landingham.
Mrs. Landingham is worried.
I love that she's watching the Capital Beat in her office on the telly. And also that she knows that CJ isn't wearing trousers. So like, Charlie comes in and she's like, I don't think CJ's wearing any pants. It's like she has this sixth sense for people not having a correct level of decorum.
Yeah, then I just love the development of the Mrs. Landingham-Charlie friendship, because Charlie then, without being at all uncomfy about speaking to an older woman in this way, says, well, she's wearing underwear, Mrs. Landingham. She's not gone smokeless.
I have a love-hate relationship with this comment because I think it's so funny. I think the term smokeless it's awful. Like, smokeless? What? I can't
delve too deeply into that, unfortunately.
No. But I just, what I love is that he says it to Mrs. Landingham, not even with a twinkle, just like him being like, yeah, no, sure, like, it's fine. She's got underwear on. Like, then we continue this sort of like funny little convo between the two of them around the fact that Mrs. Landingham needs Charlie to ask Abbey Bartlet about a check that she wrote because Jed Bartlet, the president of the United States, was balancing his own checkbook the other day.
In order to relax.
Yeah, in order to like relax. He likes to do it. But like noted a discrepancy.
But he's too scared to ask his own wife.
Yeah. Also, I think it's a phenomenal character choice to say that Jed Bartlet enjoys balancing his own checkbook.
Yeah. No, it really speaks to the man we've come to know and love.
Yes. It also speaks to the man we've come to know and love that he's afraid of his own wife.
Which, I think the world would be a better place if more men were.
Agreed.
Just a touch. Just a touch, not like terror, but like a touch of fear,
Yeah. To quote Charlie, and why doesn't he just like ask the first lady about the $500 in the normal course of, being married to her? Well, and then Mrs. Landingham's like, oh, because Abbey Bartlet shouts when Jed asks her questions about the checkbook, which is funny. But also I'm like, this boy has been doing this job for 3 years now. He's tired of this shit.
I think he was hired a year in.
A year in. So 2 years. So he's 2 years into the job. Also, like, these are his girlfriend's parents.
So funny. I will say, I think, much like they discovered that they had like a comic actress in Margaret, like in the latter half of season 1, I feel like they got into season 2 and they discovered that Dule Hill was funny.
Yeah.
And now Charlie is suddenly like allowed to be a funny character, which I love and I'm really enjoying.
And I also think he's making the most of the script as an actor as well. Like he's really finding the humor in the lines he's given.
For sure. And he's just cheeky.
He is very cheeky and very cute. And I would love to see Zoe on screen soon.
Yeah.
And see them together because I feel like we haven't seen her since the opening. So Stockard is back, Leigh. She's back on our screens.
And dear God, Abby has never looked hotter. She doesn't like entrenchment, that is for sure. But she's in like a red dress with like a matching blazer jacket. And it is just giving hourglass.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Her hair looks phenomenal. But she's mad as hell. She is fast forwarding and rewinding the recording of the State of the Union speech on this TV in the residence. And the way that she's like pounding the buttons of the controller.
It really feels viscerally like when your partner says something to you and you're just so furious about it that you're just like replaying it in your head and replaying it in your head and replaying it in your head. But of course, in her case, it's her partner giving the State of the Union.
Yeah. She is incandescent with rage, I would say.
But over what? It's unclear.
We're not sure at this point. Charlie comes in and says about the checkbook. She responds badly, as expected. And we move on.
Yeah.
To the reception dinner.
Sam getting his flowers, getting a little round of applause as he comes in.
I enjoy people being announced as they enter a room, a la Jane Austen. I think it is very fun when someone's like...
A la Jane Austen or indeed the NFL. It's like a similar vibe.
Oh, you're so funny. Yeah, famously the NFL and Jane Austen, really similar energies.
What I will say is everyone is outdoing themselves with the fashion this ep. Margaret is in a gorgeous kind of collarless grey tweed suit. And I promise this is not just a podcast about clothes, but like she looks incredible. They all look incredible this episode.
I do think Margaret's wardrobe has upped its game in this season. Also, I'd like to note that Abby is wearing red.
Yes.
To the State of the Union, which I think is a very bold choice.
A bipartisan moment.
Exactly. But there's no time to enjoy a glass of fizz at the reception dinner, Leigh, because we must away to the Situation Room.
Yes.
And news that 5 DEA agents have been abducted in Colombia.
Yes.
Not good, but dramatically very exciting.
Truly.
Cue Leo obviously just like staring into the middle distance and going, this was almost a good night. I would love for him to have enjoyed himself.
Yeah. Agreed.
It's tough. I feel like the burnout is
real for sure.
I think maybe the second half of this season, I think we're going to see some like cracks in Leo. Mm-hmm. He's been sailing too smoothly for too long, and I think his character is ready for another bump. Mm-hmm. Back to the polls. So the reason that the police officer that I mentioned earlier was important was because he was mentioned by the president in his speech by name.
Yeah.
Because he did something good at an elementary school. We're not sure what, but he's obviously he's been pointed out as an example. Mm-hmm. And now we're worried that actually he's a bad cop.
Yeah.
So that's going to be like a massive news story.
Yes.
That's going to pull away massively from anything that was raised in the State of the Union.
Yes.
Which is why we're worried. But what I'm worried about is Donna.
This is self-destruction. Like I've never seen it before. Just like absolutely breaking her own heart by pushing Josh towards Joey. It is kind of catastrophizing. And we love a worst case scenario girl. Many of our best friends are worst case scenario girls. But I do completely understand the vibe of like, well, if it's going to happen, I just want it to happen now.
Yeah. How many times is acceptable to ask someone that you like to ask out someone else?
I mean, in a world in which one has self-respect.
Go on.
Ideally 0.
Yeah, truly. I think she's pushing it too hard, right?
She is. Yeah,
and
correct.
I just feel like Donna seems sad, and I am getting almost frustrated with the fact that like Josh is fucking clueless.
Blind.
Back to some more news coming in about Colombia, where we get Margaret pulling a politician from the dinner reception thing. Mm-hmm. And she does this in a way that is so cool. So she goes up to this guy and just like touches him on the shoulder and is like, oh, so sorry to interrupt. Leo McGarry would love to introduce you to an old friend. And the guy looks and is like, oh, absolutely. And then they walk away and she's like, he needs you in the Situation Room.
It was so good.
It's very cool.
I'm glad that like despite the fact that, Margaret is being kind of given all of these like unhinged comedy beats, that we are actually in fact confirming that she is good at her job when she needs to be.
Yes. I know. I think you're so right. That's so important that she's not just like this chaotic person.
Like she's capable of being low key when it matters. I mean,
when it's talking about RSIs or muffins, less so. But when it's about like the safety of like
DEA
government
agents
in another country, she's like there.
Yeah.
Also, did you notice, Leigh, that the actor who goes in to be like the kind of lead on this particular story is the dad in Ugly Betty?
I don't know Ugly Betty, so I wouldn't have recognized him. I've never watched it.
He's fabulous. He's an amazing actor. And like, yeah, he's really giving in this episode, like coming in again, day player, playing his status beautifully. And so Leah's running this moment in the Situation Room because obviously Jed's still tied up in all of the kind of State of the Union fanfare, business, handshaking, etc. Leo McGarry is so good at his job. Yeah. And like he really is a wartime consigliere because when the shit is hitting the fan, he is just like problem solving left, right, and center. And actually, when stuff's just kind of like ticking along, I think he feels more stressed. Speaking of people being stressed, Ainsley Hayes is back on screen and on Capitol Beat, Leigh.
She is. I will say I continue to feel stressed for every single White House employee sitting down at the table for Capitol Beat. It just feels destined for disaster at every moment.
It really does. Especially as like the Republican hire that like there was all this kind of like drama around. You're like, is she going to say something?
Yeah.
I would like the record to state that Sam Seaborn is hanging on her every word. And it's really giving like, I need any chance to talk to her.
Fully.
You know when you like have a crush at school and you're like, waiting for things to happen or like for them to say stuff so that you can say something to them.
Literally like calculating based off of your class schedules when you are most likely to pass each other in the hall. Yeah.
A fun fact that we find out in her interview on Capitol Beat is that Ainsley's never met the president.
And then I had to go back and think, and I was like, oh my God, she hasn't.
Because I felt like they had met.
No.
But they hadn't.
He just saw her on TV and was impressed with her.
Which is actually like kind of incredible, right?
It's a vibe, yeah.
I also loved that like at the end of her little interview with the horrible Mark, she just like smiles and nods and she says, yeah, it's a really big night for me.
Oh.
And it's so extremely cute. And I'm so glad that she's ditched her hateful friends.
Yes, agreed. Just unbridled joy. We love to see it.
And then they go to like a commercial break and Sam's like, can I like borrow Ainsley for a moment? And they like wander off into the halls. She just says, aren't I delightful? And he just goes, yes. I mean, get a room.
I also just love that she's like so uncool about it. Like, you know, there's so many people that when they're having like a big career night, they'll just try and be like, yeah, I do this every day. Like, it's not a big deal. Like, I totally belong here. I really love someone who's just authentically like, this is a huge night for me.
And that, I think, Leigh, is why I feel so passionately about Ainsley and Sam perhaps getting together because
they share that earnestness.
They're both very earnest, but they're also very uncool people.
Yeah. Despite how hot they both happen to be.
They're like super, super hot, but like really nerdy and weird and like socially awkward.
Yeah.
And so therefore they're perfect together. For example, Sam's like, oh, I can't believe you've never met the president. I'll make it happen. Like we'll make it so like you run into him in the halls or whatever. And then could you be Ainsley with this line?
I'm having a good night. I just want to keep having a good night. I don't want to live in fear of the inevitable bungling of the English language that will occur and the mortification that will ensue.
I love that such a specific thing happens to her when she's nervous and that it's just basically like she's eaten a thesaurus.
I'm obsessed with it. And I love that like all of the other characters speak quite effortlessly in this kind of like Aaron Sorkin-y kind of versey cadence. But she gets so kind of ahead of her own speech when she's talking that sometimes when she does it, it ends up coming out backwards.
Yeah. It's amazing.
It's such a cute little like character thing.
And I think the reason why I feel like her and Sam are destined for each other is because if it were Josh, he would like laugh and be like, okay, whatever.
Whatever, kid.
Whatever, kid. But Sam looks at her like she's made of sunlight. The sexual tension between them is insane.
And then he just says, and try to remember that you're a leggy blonde Republican and nobody likes you.
They need to kiss or something. It's unbearable. Let's cut away though to just Abbey Bartlet giving a tight five at this reception. She's just like on a little stage,
Truly.
like with a handheld mic.
And she's like, just to be clear, this is not my formal toast. I'll be doing that later, obviously.
But she's doing very much the smiling wife.
Yeah.
But underneath Leigh, we can see her simmering.
Yeah.
And who enters the room? Toby Ziegler, who gets this little fanfare moment.
And is that a little smile? Do I detect a little Toby smile?
The corner of his mouth twitches slightly. It could be perceived as a smile.
But not for long, because then Abby goes in for the kill.
She literally goes up to him and like some sort of poisonous spider, like claws her fingers into his arm and is like, I want to see you in your office in half an hour.
And he just says, Yes, ma'am.
Truly terrifying.
I cannot wait for the Toby Abbey showdown. Wow, I'm thrilled.
Back at the polls, with the man with no patience.
Obsessed that Josh is just perusing Vogue.
This was a top tier moment for me. It brought me joy in what seemed like reasonably stressful times. Just like Josh sat on a sofa flicking through a copy of Vogue, being like, why isn't everyone giving me what I want?
Then Donna just really doubles down on the self-sabotage.
Donna then, again, about 6 times in a row is like, you should ask Joey out.
Yeah.
She then says, you have to say it. You have to ask a girl out on a date. You can't just randomly tumble into a girl sideways and hope she breaks up with you soon the way you always do.
Now, this I do in fact appreciate, actually, because she has read Josh for filth there.
It's entirely correct. But I think the thing that like got at me was like, that's relevant to both Donna and Joey. Which is just like, fucking ask someone out.
She's saying Joey, but she's actually talking about herself.
Also, I loved that she got to say this to him after he was so awful to her when she had that date and was basically like,
yeah,
you're too desperate and it turns men off.
Yeah. At least hers was charming.
Mm-hmm. Then Joey and Kenny come back and Joey and Josh flirt horrendously again. And Josh is like, when am I going to get the numbers? And Joey, and I quote, tells him to have some juice and crackers.
And this is where, despite the fact that she's coming between Josh and Donna, Joey is in fact exactly what Josh Lyman requires.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I feel like it's nice to see after the like really difficult time that we saw Josh having in Noelle.
It is kind of oddly emotional seeing him fully peacocking again. I'm like, why am I happy for him?
Yeah, it's nice to see like this feels very like start of season 1 Josh energy.
Yeah.
So that's nice. And then Leigh, the power goes out.
Fun, hot.
A simple yet effective concept in a TV show that we always love. I love a power outage.
I will just say also that I think one of the main reasons why you and I both think power outages are hot is because of The Night Watch by Sarah Waters.
Oh my God. Now, yes, truly, the things that happened during the blackout, like lesbians thrived during the Blitz.
Can I just say you would have thrived during the Blitz?
I would have just been like into men's clothes immediately.
In a kind of overall with your hair wrapped in a kind of Liberty print. You would have been ready to go. Yeah,
just like saving women from their houses whilst their husbands are away.
Yeah, I don't know what I would have done. I would have been someone's stenographer somewhere.
Yeah, just like in your pin curls, just like a telegram. Anyway, it's time to go back to Capital Beatley, and this time it's Toby on TV.
Who let Toby on TV?
I think I get scared when I see Toby on TV because we know that he's a fiery gal.
Yeah, but I will say he does make quite a fabulous argument on guns, actually.
Yeah.
One of the best I've heard.
Also, I love when Toby schools people with the Constitution.
Yeah.
Like he knows the Constitution so well.
It's his superpower, for sure.
Yeah.
He is Constitution boy.
I'm Constitution boy. Now, the thing that Toby is more worried about is not messing up on TV. It is dealing with an angry Stockard Channing.
Which is so fair. It's beyond fair.
So he gets off of Capital Beat and he's literally like, I think is it Bonnie or Ginger? One of the dynamic duo. He's like, where is she? Has she been waiting long? And they're like, she's in your office. And he's like striding to his office. In his office, it's just Abbey Bartlet like leaning on his desk, waiting for him to arrive.
Wow.
Toby then tries to explain himself about the changes that he made to the State of the Union speech. And she just says, don't talk to me like I'm other people. You've never done that.
Said every ex at a post-mortem meetup ever.
Honestly, it cut me to my core. Just because there is no swifter way to be like, no, start again.
Crap.
Say it better.
Mm-hmm.
Don't talk to me like I'm other people. You've never done that. And, to be fair to him, he then is like, okay, right, cool, like, let's get into it.
Oh, say what you like about Toby. He's self-aware. He is a self-aware man, and they are rarer than one thinks.
Yeah, he really is. And what he ends up like talking to Abby about is the fact that I think on previous drafts of the script, Abby had kind of been involved with the speech writing and like the topics that were going to be kind of mainly focused on. And actually just like lots of things changed. And I guess she was feeling a little bit like how Sam felt in the drop-in, which is like, I thought we were sharing everything.
Yeah.
And actually, I think you know why I'm upset and you should have come and talked to me. And I think what Toby is very subtly trying to say is, I don't think you're angry with me. I think you're angry with your husband right now.
Yes.
And then there's this moment where you can see Abby having some sort of realization. And then she checks herself and she's like, it's okay, like, let's just move on.
Yeah.
Because you see her clocking like, I need to talk to my husband.
Yeah.
My beef is with him. Let's go to, again, a very beautifully written scene that's a tough watch.
Yeah.
Which is CJ has pulled aside Officer Sloan, the aforementioned police officer, from the party into her office. Conjecture she's managed to change after the whole trouser incident.
Yeah.
And is wearing red again.
Yeah, gorgeous red shift dress and matching long line blazer. Stunning.
Yeah, she looks really great. And she sits the police officer down, who's like, I'd say like a man in his 50s, like late 50s. And is like, you need to tell me about this thing that's on your record. Like, what's the story? Because the press are going to get the story. And it's just the actor playing the police officer gives a really heartbreaking performance.
It's extremely ominous and extremely heartbreaking, yes.
And it's a really tough storyline because essentially he was pulled into a civil suit surrounding the fact that a man had said that when he was being arrested, the police officer was using excessive force and broke his leg, and that the case ended up being dismissed. But obviously that incident stayed on the police officer's record. And CJ's like, why the hell didn't you mention anything to us? Like when we were saying that we were going to like talk about you when we invited you here, like this is exactly the sort of stuff you need to tell us about. And he just says, I assumed it was okay now that I was okay. Like after what I must have been like a good thing that he'd done at this elementary school.
And like, I'm inclined to believe him because he mentions that this, I guess, kid who he was chasing as a police officer was like a track star. And so if his leg wasn't already broken, how would he have possibly caught up to him? So I think we are inclined to say like, he's not telling tall tales. Like we are inclined to believe him, but it's just kind of a question of like wrong place, wrong time almost.
Yeah, it's a really interesting plot line because I think, and even in the year 2000, it's like so interesting to see, especially from like CJ's perspective, her being like, I can only control the narrative if I know the narrative.
Yes.
Like, I can only spin if you give me the information. If I don't have it, then we lose.
Yeah.
It's also kind of phenomenal to see this kind of moment happen in a pre-social media world.
Yeah. Fascinating.
That she's like, you need to understand how quickly the news cycle changes.
Yeah.
And I was like, the fact that we're talking about this pre-social media, think about that press secretary role now.
Crazy.
And how quickly the news cycle can change. So I just thought it was really interesting. Meanwhile, the blackout is still ongoing. Josh is being awful. He's on the phone, I think, to Sam. And we just hear like him starting a thought, not ending it.
Yeah.
Where he says, Donna is acting kind of...
What I wouldn't have given for Josh to finish that sentence.
Yeah.
Because he says it thoughtfully. He doesn't say it like irritated. He's reflective.
The penny is almost starting to fall.
Yeah.
It's not fully dropping.
Fascinating.
The penny is in the early.
It is. We are in the slot machine.
Yeah. But we're back with Jed. And the fact that Sam Seaborn is trying to orchestrate this meetup between Jed and Ainsley, because obviously he loves Ainsley. And he's like, oh, if you could just like say something to her about how she's doing a good job. And Jed's like, well, what would I say to her? And then Sam says the most unhinged thing ever because he doesn't understand how normal people talk. He says, maybe say something like, A lot of people assumed you were hired because you're a blonde Republican sex kitten, and they were obviously wrong, and you're doing a great job.
Stop telling us how hot you think Ainsley is, Sam. Please. Please.
I think using the term sex kitten
Crazy.
in front of the leader of the free world is crazy.
And your boss's boss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The president, Leigh.
The president of the United States. It's also, we may be in 2000. We're not in 1950.
No, we are not. Jed's getting briefed on the Columbia story.
Mm-hmm.
And in this kind of process of him getting briefed, he does at one point walk into the Oval Office and it's like full of generals. And that was very cool.
But where is Fitzy?
Where's Fitzwallace? Like,
I'm
was he
concerned.
off working on another show? Like, he's not present in this series so far. Like,
no.
In season 2. Like, do you think there was some sort of filming schedule conflict?
I hope he's not in Mandyland. That's all I have to say.
The Columbia story is continuing, and I will say, I think it's really interesting. And I feel like often in this show, we never get to follow foreign political stories through more than one episode.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna say I really would love to like keep going with this.
Yeah.
Still no power at the polls.
Donna has lost her sweet mind in the face of Joey Lucas.
Yeah, she's like sat next to Josh saying, you know what I'm surprised about? We haven't seen a lot of looting. Usually in these cases, you see a lot more looting. General civil unrest, you know, people getting on each other's nerves. What are you hinting at, Donna? Is Josh getting on your nerves? Then 2 low points for Josh. The first one being he asks Joey if it's possible to open up the back of a computer and get the numbers out from there.
Point. Yeah, it's a low point for sure.
He doesn't know tech. He's bad at tech.
Yeah.
And I actually think it's a really useful character trait for him to have.
Again, it's 2000, not 1950.
Yeah. And then the second low point, Leigh.
Screaming in the face of a deaf person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like a real swing and a miss, Josh.
Yeah, it's a low point for sure.
It's a low point.
Screaming in the face of a deaf person with whom you are currently flirting.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Just can't chill, babe. The man has no chill. So Sam has been called to Ainsley's office. Why?
Oh.
Why? He gets there to the, is it called, it's the steam pipe distribution
Center
room. She is hammered. She's like playing music and she's dancing around her office in a bathrobe.
No one drinks like a victorious Republican.
He like stands in the doorway and watches her and you're like, wow, you think she's so cute. And she's like, get into it, you know? I'm just, you know, I'm off air now. I'm off duty. I'm just having a drink. I'm having fun. Turns out she also sat in paint.
So she's now also in a bathrobe.
Yeah. And he's like, oh, are you having a drink? And she's like, yeah, I just didn't want you to think I'm like some lame teetotaler. The drink that she is drinking is more disgusting than CJ's drink of choice. CJ's drink of choice was the grasshopper. Like, does Aaron Sorkin think women have a terrible taste in beverages?
I would love one woman to drink a whiskey on this show. Do you know
Honestly,
what I mean? I just want one woman to drink a scotch.
So CJ drank a grasshopper in the scene where they went to the club. And obviously a grasshopper is disgusting. Ainsley is drinking a pink squirrel. A pink squirrel is literally cream, heavy cream, creme de cacao, and like almond liquor.
That's got to be a disgusting hangover. That's
but also,
so
like,
much dairy.
That's such a horrible drink. Then she's like sipping her drink, and then she says, "Oh, dance with me, Sam." And in my head, I was like, "Oh my god, it's gonna happen! It's gonna happen!" And he's he's like acting like he doesn't want to, but like, you know, like in seconds, they're gonna be locking lips in seconds.
But alas,
and who comes round the corner?
The President of the United States.
Ainsley screams and throws her glass across the room. And Jed Bartlet just stands in the doorway and goes, "What's up?"
We love Ainsley because Ainsley loves the sesh.
It's the most mortifying moment I've ever witnessed.
And then Jed actually says the sex kitten thing.
He says what Sam told him to say, word for word, and then leaves. And I screamed.
And that is a man who is done with his day.
Yeah. He's like, wow, what is happening in the building that I run? We close out in the kitchens.
Yes.
To an unbelievable unbelievable scene between...
I didn't think we could get better than the Oval Office fight, but I think we have.
Jed and Abbey, when they fight, are sensational. And I think it's because it's like two proper, like amazing actors.
Yeah.
And the dialogue is so good. Like, it must be such a gift for the two of them. And they have such great chemistry. Like, what an easy day on set when you're like, this is the scene we're filming.
Wow.
And we're with Stockard and we're with Martin Sheen.
Yeah.
Like, let's go.
Gorge.
Abbey Bartlet is sat in the kitchens. She's just like eating a burger and drinking a glass of milk, which is incredibly American. But she's seething. Jed comes in. He then clears the kitchen of staff, which I think is a baller move considering there is a banquet going on.
Yeah.
And he's like, like, what's going on? And she just looks up and she says, Jed, you know what? I'm not your mommy.
True. Yes,
and
correct.
I was like, this is not going to go well for Jed. So it turns out that in order to be like more palatable going into another election campaign, Jed dropped most of Abby's like key causes and passion projects that she was working on from his speech. Also, it becomes clear that he hasn't at this point told her that he's going to run again.
I don't know that he's discussed it with anyone because Leo and Toby have kind of kicked it off on their end. And I feel like maybe there's like a tacit agreement between Jed and those two that he is running again. Yeah. But to be fair to Jed, I don't think it's that he's kept it secret from Abbey. I think it's that he's maybe not said it out loud yet.
But I do need him to tell his wife that he's running for president again.
Because I didn't realize, but it kind of seems like in this scene that they had an agreement that it was going to be a one-term thing.
She said, like, we had a deal. She's like, you kicked off your re-election campaign and I'm sitting here eating a sandwich because we had a deal.
Correct, yeah. Wow.
And then poor Charlie.
I really don't envy Charlie having to come in and interrupt this one.
Again, his girlfriend's parents and also the first family of America.
I forgot that they were his girlfriend's parents in this moment. That adds a whole other level.
And he's like, we need to like go back to the party. And I will say that Stockard Channing walking back into that party and she walks in and she's like, oh my God, Marjorie, like shakes hand, kissing people on the cheek. It's giving Emma Thompson smoothing the bedspread, dabbing under the eyes, and then like getting the kids ready for the nativity play.
You have never been more correct. Yes.
What a moment to end on. And that's just where the episode closes out. Unresolved tension.
Is it the emotional women putting on a public smile is so moving? I don't know.
Destroys me. Anyway, cracking episode, cracking way to end. What will happen next?
Yeah. Who knows?
To the quick fires, Lee Douglas. Best fashion.
I would have to agree with you in a moment for Bipartisan Red. I think you're absolutely
Abbey,
correct there.
CJ, Ainsley, all in red. Burgundy from Bonnie.
Yeah, gorge.
And what could a British or Irish politician just never get away with?
Again, I have to give it to you, the use of the phrase sex kitten.
Yeah.
That doesn't even sound right in an Irish accent. Do you know what I mean?
No, sex kitten, it's not for me. It's not for either of our accents, I believe.
No.
How long until guns, abortion, free speech, religion, our big bingo card topics came up? I feel like there's quite a few things being raised in this episode. I feel like it's our first reference to like the actual war on drugs, as in like the smuggling of illegal drugs from other parts of the world into America and the impact that that's having. That feels very juicy. And Lee, what was your best writerly moment?
You have to say it. You have to ask a girl out on a date. You can't just randomly tumble into a girl sideways and hope she breaks up with you soon the way you always do.
Yeah, that was very good.
Yeah.
That was very good. I think mine is, I'm having a good night. I just want to keep having a good night. I don't want to live in the fear of the inevitable bungling of the English language that will occur and the mortification that will ensue.
Yeah.
And man, I feel like a man.
So many to choose from. I'm just going to say every moment that Josh Lyman was on screen in this episode.
Yeah. Up there is where the president eats. That is his place of business. Yes, he did it well. I think that I have to give an honourable mention to, well, she's wearing underwear, Mrs. Landingham. Yeah. She's not gone smokeless.
Absolutely agreed, yes.
I also had an offer for Girl, I Feel Like a Girl.
Yes.
Which goes to Donna for you have to ask a girl out on a date.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just randomly tumble into a girl sideways. Gorgeous. And Leigh, what's the moment that made you proudest to be an American?
Don't speak to me like I'm other people.
I just would like you all to know that when Leigh said that line, she stared straight down the camera and into my soul. Mine had to be, Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States. I loved that.
Yeah, gorgeous.
Great episode.
Gorgeous.
Amazing. So Leigh, what are we focusing on today?
Wow. We're going to get there in a little bit of a roundabout way. But in honor of the media and indeed Stockard Channing as Flotus, kind of combining those two themes. But you're going to see how we're going to get there in a second. I have so much to say about this. I'm so excited.
Okay.
We begin in 1893 in a poor and kind of unstable family in rural Wisconsin, to which is born Alice Lorena Hickok, known as Hick.
Okay, first of all, can we just take a moment for Hick?
Yes, as a kind of catchy nickname.
Yeah, love that.
Yeah, she didn't ever go by Alice, though. She was kind of known to the world as either Lorena Hickok or as simply Hick. She escaped her violent father at the age of 14 and left to work as a maid before several various aunts came to her rescue, various fun aunties, if you will, and they kind of helped her get back into high school and finish high school. Mm-hmm. And she was living with an aunt in Michigan when she got a job at the Battle Creek Evening News. Now, at this time, journalism was kind of a scrappy working class profession that like a lot of young people who couldn't afford college but were smart kind of went into. She did try at college, but she left because they insisted that she live in a women's dormitory, which she was very against. She then got a job at the Minneapolis Tribune, where she kind of found a mentor in Thomas J. Dillon. And she went on to say, "The old man taught me the newspaper business, how to drink and how to live."
Wow.
Again,
obsessed.
May I just point out that we're like at the turn of the century.
I know.
Now, most female journalists at this time kind of were trapped in the society papers, you know. But because she'd found this mentor in Thomas J. Dillon, he sent her out to kind of cover politics, news, sports, all of the stuff that was generally the remit of the kind of boy journalists.
Yeah.
Now, by 1926, she was living in Minneapolis with her long-term partner, fellow journalist Ella Morse.
Oh, would you look at that?
Fiona, we have an openly out lesbian of history.
Stunning.
And she's in the newspaper business. Do you know what I mean?
She's in the newspaper business.
Now, she's diagnosed with diabetes only 3 years after synthetic insulin was made widely available as treatment. So it's like suddenly not a death sentence, although it had been very recently in kind of her living memory. But it was still kind of debilitating and much more disruptive to her life than it would be today. Yeah. Because it hadn't even been like divided into type 1 and type 2 yet at this point.
Wow.
And because she kind of gets ill with this, her partner persuades her to take a year's leave of absence and to move to San Francisco for her health. But just before they were due to leave, Ella eloped with a man.
What?
Yeah.
That was not the twist I thought was coming, Leigh.
Yeah. I honestly need like a film made about this woman's life for a variety of reasons, which we're going to continue to get to.
Somewhere Sarah Paulson is like, yes, I'm available.
Now, in 1928, so like a year later, she is hired by the Associated Press and moves solo to New York. A welcome to New York moment.
Yeah. It's been waiting for you.
Where she made her name as, quote, a dogged and brilliant reporter, according to Time magazine. She gained respect over her years at the Associated Press and went from being called that girl by her boss to covering national stories like the Lindenberg kidnapping. the Associated Press received a tip that the kidnapped baby of Charles A. Lindbergh had been found, and Hick and a photographer managed to get through the police cordon, and she picked her way through the woods at night in a blizzard on her hands and knees to crawl up to the house to confirm by kind of peering in through the window that the vigil was still going on, and therefore he had not in fact been found and the rumor was untrue. So that's just kind of an example of kind of how go-get-'em Hick truly was. Now, by this point, she kind of surpassed most of her male colleagues. She was the first woman to ever have a byline printed on the front page of the New York Times.
Wow.
Huge.
Yeah.
Now, at this point, she is the only female reporter assigned to the Roosevelt Special.
Mm-hmm.
So she started covering the Roosevelts during Franklin D. Roosevelt's gubernatorial bid for the state of New York. But she was actively at this point avoiding covering Eleanor Roosevelt because, again, she didn't want to get sidelined
caught up
to the
in
kind of
the sort of quote unquote women's stories.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She finally met Eleanor at a press event in 1932, which was during FDR's first presidential campaign.
Mm-hmm.
Now, by this point, her view of Eleanor had kind of changed because it had become clear that Eleanor was actually, much like Abbey Bartlet, one of her husband's top kind of political advisors.
Yeah.
And she was a lot more than just kind of your run-of-the-mill politician's wife. So Hick sat down for her first official interview with Eleanor Roosevelt, and sparks fly. Now, usually she was an extremely professional reporter, but at this point she received a note from her editor saying, "Don't get too close to your sources."
Did she fuck Eleanor Roosevelt?
Eleanor Roosevelt starts picking Hick out of the throngs of reporters and like favoring her to answer her questions. She asked Hick to drive in her private car, eventually asked her to have like a one-to-one breakfast in her hotel room. And after FDR won the election, Eleanor and Hick are both living in New York and spending most of their time together at this point. They're like going to gigs.
Sure, as friends. Just as friends, you know, just because women are friends, often best friends.
And kind of talking politics over like late night dinners.
They were drinking whiskey
at Hick's one-room apartment in Midtown.
Oh, bed's just there.
Now, Hick actually heard, because of her newfound closeness with Eleanor, Hick actually heard FDR's famous inaugural address the night before, but instead of leaking it as most reporters would have, she kept it to herself. Now, these two women were from very different upbringings, of course. The First Lady was kind of from an almost like aristocratic upbringing, whereas Hick had grown up in poverty. But they both kind of had a similar experience of like fighting to make their voices heard in like very male spaces. And they kind of went from like very quickly from like a professional closeness to like a warm friendship where they like really trusted each other. And Eleanor starts confiding in Hick about her fears that she's going to lose her independence basically by becoming the First Lady. Hick actually rode along with Eleanor on like various trips where she was referred to in the press as Eleanor's quote friend, quote companion, and even at one point her quote maid.
I think that the most like gay coded or like queer coded like title someone can be given is companion.
Oh, 100%. Now, after Roosevelt is elected, Hick has to go back to New York for her job at the Associated Press, and they begin exchanging long letters. They exchanged nearly 4,000 letters over the next 30 years, sometimes writing twice a day.
Wow.
And although many of the letters were destroyed by Hick, more than 2,300 survive, which you can now view at FDR Library. So Hick donated them to the FDR Library in her will on the proviso that they remain closed until 10 years after her death.
Wow.
When the letters were first made open to the public, the first person to read them was so shocked by what they read that she wanted the librarians at the Roosevelt Library to shut the archive down.
Oh my God.
But fortunately, they didn't. I'm now going to read you some quotes from the letters between Hick and Eleanor.
Please do.
This is Hick to Eleanor Roosevelt in 1933, Roosevelt's first year in office.
Mm-hmm.
Only 8 more days. 24 hours from now, it will only be 7 more. Just a week! ! I've been trying today to bring back your face, to remember just how you look. Funny how even the dearest face will fade away in time. Most clearly, I remember your eyes, with a kind of teasing smile in them, the earnest face, and the feeling of that soft spot just northeast of the corner of your mouth against my lips. I wonder what we'll do when we meet, what we'll say. Well, I'm rather proud of us, aren't you? I think we've done rather well.
What the fuck? It's giving Emily and Sue, is all I'm going to say.
This is Eleanor Roosevelt to Hick, the first night after the inauguration. So her first night, well, I guess it's her second night staying in the White House residence. March 5th, 1933. Hick, my dearest, I cannot go to bed tonight without a word to you. I feel a little as though a part of me was leaving tonight. You have grown so much to be a part of my life that it is empty without you, even though I'm busy every minute. The next day, Eleanor writes to Hick. Hick, darling, oh, how good it was to hear your voice. It was so inadequate to try and tell you what it meant. Jimmy, her son, was near, so I couldn't say, je t'aime, j'adore, as I long to do, but always remember I am saying it, and that I go to sleep thinking of you and repeating our little saying.
Wow. Wow. Why don't more people know about this? Also, why isn't this like a film or TV series? Because I would fucking eat this shit up.
There are several books we can buy. And as I was researching this...
There are several books that we can buy.
As I was researching this, because I knew vaguely about it, but I didn't know like the extent of how gay it truly was. And then I texted Lizzie, my girlfriend, about it. And she was like, no, but can you actually stop researching this? Because you're actually ruining one of your Christmas presents.
Oh, she knows you so well. But also something that I find fascinating, because obviously you're telling me this story and like I'm losing my mind and we're having like a lovely like gay old time discussing it. Mm-hmm. But it is so sad how, and I think it's specifically like lesbian relationships or like relationships where like women have loved women that feel like they've been struck from the record.
And even like there was like a book released that was talking about this kind of relationship. And there was quite a snarky comment made in the New York Times that like, even if they had an affair, it was only like very short-lived and it was probably more on Hick's side than it was on Eleanor's and like all of this kind of crap. And it's like, okay, but is it not enough that it existed? Like, why are we being so snarky about it? I don't know.
I feel like it's, like lesbian relationships are really minimized.
And diminished.
And diminished in history. And that like, even like I'm obsessed with the relationship between Vita Sackville West and Virginia Woolf. And like, I guess probably
your straight
like,
self telling me all about this in university, being like, are you aware? I'm completely obsessed, but also I'm straight.
Yeah, so straight. And kind of how they were so in love with each other and they used to run away and their husbands would be like, oh, we must go and get our wives. They've run away together again. But like, I guess probably they would be maybe classed as like kind of polyamorous and pansexual now. But like for so long in history, people, they just kind of don't want to talk about the fact that, these amazing love letters are written between these women in history. And like, again, not to sound like a massive bisexual, but like one of the saddest things is like so many of those letters are destroyed. Like so many of the letters between Emily Dickinson and Sue were destroyed.
Emily Dickinson's brother literally went in and changed pronouns in Emily Dickinson's poems.
We've lost so much of those.
And it's incredibly meaningful. Like, I think as a queer person, it's incredibly meaningful to know that like these important figures from history that we would look up to, that like, it's incredibly powerful to look back at history and like see yourself in some of these figures when, there are still people today who want to like delegitimize who we are and who we love. So
and I think something that I think makes me feel a lot of pride is how when you share like stories like this with me, it's so nice to not have, because obviously like at the time, like this is this kind of like secret thing that they have. But the content of the letters, it's so gorgeous to like have this testimony of like these amazing big feelings of love.
Yeah, fully.
And like
between also, by the way, two women in their 40s. You know, it's not like a kind of young, kind of
romance.
Teenage first love. Yeah.
And like that they exchanged thousands of letters about these big feelings that they were having. It's really gorgeous that it's not just the story that we hear a lot, or that often is the one that gets dramatized, which is like the affair.
Fully.
Like the sexy affair between married women.
Yeah.
Do you know what I
definitely.
mean?
It's just not through a male gaze, is it?
Yeah. Oh, maybe that's what it is.
Yeah. Then on Eleanor's birthday, she wrote, "Hick, darling, all day I've thought of you and another birthday when I will be with you. And yet tonight you sounded so far away and formal. Oh, I wanted to put my arms around you. I ache to hold you close. Your ring is a great comfort. I look at it and think she does love me, or I wouldn't be wearing it."
Oh, that's so lovely.
We've all got a bit insecure when our girlfriend's away. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, when there's distance, you know?
Yeah, for sure. 2 days later, my pictures are nearly all up because obviously she's still like settling into
Decorating
the White House. My pictures are nearly all up. I have you in my sitting room where I can look at you most of my waking hours. I can't kiss you, so I kiss your picture good night and good morning.
Wow.
They were good friends, said history.
Companions. Her maid.
There's also one letter, which I'm obsessed with. I promise this is the last one that I'm going to read, and then I'm just going to get to the rest of the story. But I lied. There's two. There's just one where Eleanor Roosevelt just writes, "I'm getting so hungry to see you."
Please, so sorry. Please give me a moment. Wow.
Yeah. And then the final one that I will say is, "Dear one, and so you think they gossip about us? Well, they must at least think we stand separation rather well. I am always so much more optimistic than you are. I suppose because I care so little what they say."
Oh.
So people were talking about it. Do you know what I mean? Like people were awa.
People were awa.
But also Hick basically provided Eleanor with a lot of advice. Like Eleanor really confided in Hick, as I said, about her fear that she was kind of going to lose her autonomy being the first lady. She encouraged Eleanor Roosevelt to hold her own press conferences with exclusively female reporters.
Nice.
And encouraged her to kind of keep her writing career going while she was first lady, prompting Eleanor Roosevelt to start her monthly column, Mrs. Roosevelt's Pages, which was like incredibly popular.
Yeah.
And her daily column, My Day, which I think was inspired by the kind of diary-like accounts of her day that she was sending to Hick, basically, originally. So basically, yeah, the long-standing affair between Eleanor and Hick was an open secret inside the White House, as was FDR's affair with his secretary, Missy LeHand. The historians have debated the nature of the relationship between Hick and Eleanor, but it is now basically understood to be like a very deep romance. Susan Quinn, the author of one of the books, which we will be ordering, which is Eleanor and Hick, The Love Affair That Shaped a First Lady.
Oh, yeah, great title.
Yeah. So Susan Quinn, the author of this book, says that Hick discovered very quickly that Eleanor was unhappy having to play the role of First Lady, and that she had this really vibrant, independent life of her own with a lot of women friends, some of which were lesbians and in female relationships. So Eleanor had gay friends even before she met Hick, which is like so iconic.
Incredible. Yeah.
And, you know, she'd had this whole life in New York, basically, before she became First Lady, and that she really didn't want to become First Lady and do all of those ceremonial things. And that actually Eleanor Roosevelt was really unhappy during this period of time, and that Hick was the one who kind of saw this and helped her find her own way. And actually in doing so, Eleanor Roosevelt really revolutionized the role of First Lady to be a much more politically active role.
Wow.
So I feel like we can definitely see the echoes of that in Stockard Channing's FLOTUS.
Yeah, you're so right.
On Eleanor herself, just like a moment for how Eleanor kind of found herself in this affair with Hick. She was actually a Roosevelt before she got married from Teddy Roosevelt's side.
Okay.
So she was kind of like American aristocracy. Her mom died when she was really young and her dad died only a little bit later. So from the age of 10, she was raised by like her very Victorian grandmother. And so she was actually like really lonely for a lot of her childhood. And on election night, Eleanor gave Hick the quote, "Being a Democrat, I believe this change is for the better. But I never wanted to be the president's wife. Now I shall have to work out my own salvation."
Wow.
Which is so heartbreaking. It's very Rose getting onto the Mauritania. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Eleanor Roosevelt actually discovered FDR's first infidelity in 1918. So much before this.
That's a long time before.
And so they had basically made an agreement after that affair, which I think happened while she was pregnant. They agreed after that affair, basically if they'd gotten divorced at that point, it would have ended his political career. So they agreed to kind of stay social partners, but it wasn't romantic by the time she met Hick. It's basically agreed amongst historians. And like Eleanor Roosevelt did a huge amount of like incredible things as First Lady. She was incredibly instrumental for civil rights, and she was on the board of the NAACP. You know, she was a really like important voice in that sense. And once she realized that in the role of First Lady as kind of the hostess, she initially called it a useless burden, but then she realized that she could further political interests by inviting members of various organizations to high profile events. So she realized that she could be kind of politically effective in that kind of hostess role.
She's like a networking queen, basically.
Exactly.
And like, when you control the guest list, you have so much power.
Yeah, for sure. And I think she was a little bit more liberal than her husband, actually. You know, she did kind of push Roosevelt towards a lot of these like New Deal programs. Now, through the affair, basically, it became incredibly clear, incredibly quickly to everyone that Hick couldn't be a kind of like objective reporter on the White House or the First Family. And so basically, Hick then got a job working through the Great Depression for the head of the Federal Emergency Relief Administration, Harry Hopkins. So she was basically, Hick at this point, the reason why we have so many letters is Hick was traveling the country doing the research about the poverty that the New Deal programs needed to combat. So she was like out in the field, and because she'd come from this like really impoverished background, she knew how to speak to people to see what they needed, and also had that kind of language to be able to speak with everyday Americans to be like, what help do you need? In this role, she got her first write-up in Time magazine.
Wow.
Where I just think this is so fascinating, like how she was described at the time, but it says, Chief Field Representative and Investigator, Miss Lorena Hickok, who for 8 years worked for the Associated Press. She is a rotund lady with a husky voice, a peremptory manner, and baggy clothes. It's sounding very butch to me.
Yes.
In her day, one of the country's best female news hawks, she was assigned to Albany to cover the New York Executive Mansion, where she became fast friends with Mrs. Roosevelt. Since then, she has gone around a lot with the First Lady, up to New Brunswick and down to Warm Springs. Last July, Mr. Hopkins, who is a great admirer of Mrs. Roosevelt, hired Miss Hickok, and now she travels all over the country using her nose for news to report on relief conditions. Last week, when it was announced that Mrs. Roosevelt planned to visit Puerto Rico in March, it became known that Miss Hickok would also be going to look into Mr. Hopkins' relief work there. Now, obviously, I don't want to like overlook Lorena Hickok's incredible career in favor of this kind of like salacious affair that she had with one of the most important first ladies in American history. Because obviously, from being like such a pioneering female journalist to then her work through the Great Depression, like she helped so many people. And also she was just like out and proud, like in the 30s and the 20s, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Also, she did live in the White House. She was invited to live in the White House by Eleanor.
Really?
She had her own bedroom in the White House, yeah.
That's kind of iconic.
Yeah. Eleanor Roosevelt had a full live-in girlfriend in the White House. So she would like go off and travel and do this kind of field work, and then she'd come back and live at the White House. It's all very modern.
Isn't it?
But obviously, as we know, FDR died in office in 1945. And Lorena Hickok and Eleanor Roosevelt lived together on a cottage on the Roosevelt estate. Now, by this point, Lorena Hickok was getting increasingly ill from complications of her diabetes.
Yeah.
But they penned several books together. She became Eleanor Roosevelt's first biographer. She wrote the book The Reluctant First Lady. That was the first biography
Wow,
of
that's such
Eleanor
a good
Roosevelt.
title.
Yeah. And they also together made a collection of profiles of remarkable women called Ladies of Courage. Obviously, Eleanor Roosevelt also went on to do incredible things, becoming the US delegate to the United Nations after her husband's death, and was instrumental in making the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is just an incredible feat. Eleanor Roosevelt died in 1962 and Hick died in 1968 of complications from diabetes. Her ashes at the time were consigned to the unclaimed remains area of her town's cemetery. But in 2000, a plaque was placed over her previously unmarked grave, which reads in part, AP reporter, author, activist, and friend of ER.
Oh, I'm really sad they're not buried together.
Mm.
Or at least, it's kind of heartbreaking that her grave was unmarked for so long when she was such a instrumental individual in journalism.
Yeah, absolutely. Years later, her reports about the New Deal in the 1930s were compiled and edited into a book called 1/3 of a Nation, Lorena Hickok Reports on the Great Depression. But yeah, I love them.
Yeah, me too. I think they're so great. And I will be losing myself to the internet on this.
Fabulous. Well, thank you for listening to another episode of Queer Gals Watch the West Wing. We are Queer Gals
I've
Watch.
had a great time, at least. I hope you have too.
You can tell we've been drinking because this is the longest record we've done thus far. And we've been talking about the gays.
Yeah, we have been rabbiting on for almost hours at this point.
Yeah.
Please do get in touch with us. We love hearing from you. Our socials are at Queer Gals Watch on Instagram and X, and we are at queergalswatch@gmail.com if you wish to send us a little email.
I don't know that we're on X just because I can't stand Elon Musk.
Which I think is understandable. I stand by that.
But yeah, get in touch with us in whatever your preferred method of modern day communication is. We are in most places except for X. We're on Gmail, queergalswatch@gmail.com. And we love hearing anything that you'd like us to focus on, any thoughts, any feelings. We love hearing from the people who listen in.
Because we still can't believe that you exist. Honestly, Leigh and I chatting away, and here you all are. Listening. Honestly, it's baffling and
mind-boggling.
It makes me quite emotional.
Thank you so much for hanging out with us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And until next time.
Yeah, we'll do this again next week.
Nice.
Awesome. I'll see you then.
And a happy new year.
And a happy... Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.